In this segment, we will debate question number 7, which would relax certain laws dealing with the criminalization of marijuana. On my right is Todd Raybuck. Mr. Raybuck is a Metro officer and a member of Nevada Says No. He will speak against question number 7. Neil Levine is campaign manager of the Committee to Regulate and Control Marijuana. He will speak in favor of the ballot measure. And now let me read question number 7, if we can pull that up. It says, shall Titles 32, 40, and 43 of the Nevada Revised Statutes be amended in order to allow and regulate the sale, use, and possession of 1 ounce or less of marijuana by persons at least 21 years of age, impose licensing requirements on marijuana retailers and wholesalers, allow for the sale of marijuana by licensed marijuana retailers and wholesalers, impose taxes and restrictions on the wholesale and retail sale of marijuana, and to increase the criminal penalties for causing death or substantial bodily harm when driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Mr. Raybuck, sounds like there's a lot of restrictions in place.
Well, the restrictions are nothing more than a rotten carrot that they're trying to dangle in front of Nevada voters to fool them to look past what this really is about. What this really is about is legalizing marijuana for people who are 21 and older and allowing pot shops to be placed in our neighborhoods. My first initiation to marijuana, I was a freshman in high school. It was raining outside. I took shelter in a school bus stop, and there were 3 older students in there smoking a marijuana cigarette. That was the first time I'd ever been around anybody with marijuana. And that day, one of the older kids, after taking a toke on that marijuana cigarette, reached over to hand it to me and asked me if I wanted to try it. And I said, no, thank you. When I grow up, I want to be a police officer. And they kind of all snickered. But I didn't take a drag of that marijuana cigarette that day, and in fact, I never have. And the reality is that day, what prevented me from smoking marijuana was, 1, my dream of being a police officer, 2, knowing that marijuana was illegal and that cops couldn't smoke pot. The fact is, what question 7 wants to do is change that. Question 7, passing it and making marijuana legal for adults, tells our kids that smoking pot is just part of growing up, and it allows police officers to smoke pot. And I think that's incorrect and a bad thing for the future of Nevada.
Please respond.
Well, Sheriff Phil Young smoked marijuana, and he's had a successful law enforcement career. So, what we're proposing is pulling the sale of small amounts of, the majority of what the officer says correct. We're proposing pulling small amounts of marijuana out of the criminal market and putting it for adults into a tightly regulated and controlled market, most of which you read in the ballot initiative. What it didn't say is it's also doubling the penalties for giving or selling to a minor. It's not a rotten carrot. What it is a sensible proposal in exchange for a current system that just doesn't work. Anybody who wants to smoke marijuana can smoke marijuana. According to the federal government, 50% of high school seniors in Nevada admit to the federal government they've smoked marijuana. 20% admit that they smoke habitually. So the laws do not work. That's the reality. And so are we going to continue going down this path, or are we going to then say, okay, well then we'll put marijuana for adults into a tightly regulated system? You know, once you tell people that they can't do something, you lose, and they ignore that, especially with the numbers that people are with marijuana, you lose all ability to regulate it or control it.
What about the argument that the laws don't work?
You know what? We tell people all day long they can't do things. And the fact is that there are still a small portion of the population that will do it regardless, as Mr. Levine pointed out. Mr. Levine likes to point out that half of Nevada students have tried marijuana, and that is a true fact. But the fact is 4 out of 5 of them are not currently using marijuana. And the fact is that 94% of Americans do not currently use marijuana. He brought up the fact that it's a small amount of marijuana. What Mr. Levine is trying to portray to Nevada voters to allow in Nevada is actually that anybody could carry 1 ounce of marijuana with them wherever they go. I mean, we're talking about letting people 21 and older, tourists, Nevada residents, to just have this much pot in their pocket and walk around. And then, according to some pro-marijuana websites, that's enough for a 3-month supply. And Mr. Levine wants to sugarcoat that and hide behind these trumped-up, penalties that he portrays. We don't need to legalize marijuana in Nevada to increase laws on the books and to punish people who make mistakes and make bad judgment errors. We don't need to legalize pot and put marijuana in our pot shops and tell our kids that smoking pot's part of growing up for that.
Well, we're not telling kids that smoking pot is part of growing up. like I said, the initiative doubles the penalty for anybody who gives or sells marijuana to a minor. You cannot enter an establishment.
You know that.
I'll let you talk.
Okay, you're right.
You cannot enter an establishment unless you're 21 years of age with a valid ID. So you can't even get into the establishment that sells marijuana, much less buy it. It's prohibited in convenience stores and gas stations. We're not putting it into the local 7-Eleven, and they can't be located within 500 feet of a church or a house of worship or a school. You know, props are fun, but the reality is the amount that's being offered in this initiative is less than you're allowed to have under Nevada's current medical marijuana law. The sky hasn't fallen. It's been the law of the land for 6 years. Not only that, but the reality is, according to the federal government, which packages marijuana and sends it to really sick people every month, 1 ounce of marijuana is 31 marijuana cigarettes. That's according to the federal government. We're talking about a pack and a half of cigarettes equivalent. But regardless, that does not justify financing the activities from really bad people. Also, Raybuck says 4 out of 5 high school seniors don't habitually smoke marijuana. That's success. 20% of 17-year-olds in Nevada habitually smoke marijuana. The laws are a complete failure. Anybody who wants it can get it, and we're financing the activities of some very bad people. According to a 2006 drug threat assessment from the Department of Justice, the #1 supplier of marijuana in this country are Mexican drug cartels. 61% of the drug trade coming into this country is marijuana. They're selling it to our inner city street gangs.
I got a question, though, about the whole federal law. If a federal agent can still bust someone for small amounts of marijuana, even if this passes, federal law would still trump state law, wouldn't it?
It would, but, you know,
so
Nevada...
why even get behind it?
Federal law doesn't acknowledge medical marijuana, but the state of Nevada does. And under the state of Nevada, an ounce or less of marijuana is a $600 fine. Under federal law, it's a year in jail. Nevada has the right to make its marijuana laws. We already don't have... The reality is that 99% of all marijuana arrests in this country, which we arrested more people than the populations of Las Vegas and Las Vegas and Reno combined last year, 99% of all arrests are made on the local level.
Well, you know, Mr. Levine, first of all, he brings up the medical marijuana issue a couple of times. The truth is, this is not about compassion. This is about allowing potheads to smoke pot. So
well, that's derogatory. This is not a medical marijuana initiative.
Derogatory, but it's the truth. That's what it's about.
This is an initiative that would allow responsible adults to smoke marijuana in the privacy of their own home.
Let's talk about responsible adults. A large majority, in fact, more than 50% of people who smoke marijuana think that they drive better while they're under the influence of marijuana and are willing to drive.
Under our initiative, anybody hurts or kills somebody while driving under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, or any drug would be facing double the amount of penalty.
And that's little sympathy to the people who are the victims afterwards.
But anybody who wants to smoke marijuana is now.
That's not true.
In order for your premise to be correct, the laws work, and people are not currently smoking marijuana, and that's just completely false.
Mr. Levine would like people to believe that since a small portion of the population don't abide by the law, that therefore we should erase those laws. The fact is that you could say the same argument for theft. You could say since people steal, then we should get rid of theft laws. Since people speed, we should get rid of speed laws. The fact is that this is not a harmless drug. It is not a victimless crime. The majority of people who are in foster care are there because of substance abusing parents. We have ballot questions that speak about secondhand smoke. We all understand the dangers of that, and Nevada voters will vote on that. It's no different. This is an intoxicating smoke-inducing drug that Mr. Levine thinks that people who use it are on an island by themselves.
What's more harmful, cigarettes or marijuana cigarettes?
Cigarettes, absolutely.
Well,
Hundreds
wait a minute.
of thousands of people die every year from tobacco. And not only that, but marijuana is safer than alcohol, which is a scientific, you could chuckle if you want, but alcohol is more addictive. 20,000 people a year die from alcohol overdose. In all recorded medical history, there's not been a single marijuana overdose ever recorded. The reality is that we have this hypocrisy in the law where somebody who wants to relax, an adult who wants to relax at the end of the day with a beer is fine, but we're going to criminalize the behavior of somebody who wants to use marijuana, and that's wrong. And it's about, Officer Raybuck says we have a very small amount of people who use marijuana in our society. These laws are being ignored. They don't work. Anybody who wants to use marijuana can use marijuana. We just had a statewide coalition of religious leaders come out and support this initiative. And there was a very interesting story by Reverend Hansen who said that, he was thinking about this, pondering this, because he's a scholar. He didn't just go into it without understanding what he was talking about, like the officer said. And the reality is that he went and talked to his 16-year-old daughter and said, do you know where to get marijuana? And his 18-year-old son laughed at him and said, what a stupid question. And his daughter said, of course, I know who has it, where they are in the parking lot of the cars. It's in our schools. I'm a parent. And there was a very interesting quote that I read from our former Attorney General, Brian Sandoval, where he said that he was talking about the We Card program for smoking tobacco. And he was talking about this huge reduction in teenage smoking because of the We Card program. And he said the #1 line of defense for tobacco smoking is being a parent, which I agree with anything. But I take comfort in the fact knowing that there's a second-line defense out there, someone who's going to ID my child.
Every year, underage drinkers consume. There's 11 million underage drinkers, and a large majority of those get those through an illegal market. Mr. Levine would like people to believe that if we pass legalization and put pot shops in our neighborhood, I've never heard. It seems ridiculous that you could take care of a problem that he claims anybody that can smoke it can get it by putting pot shops in our neighborhood and telling everybody where to go to get it. It just seems kind of ridiculous.
Officer, let me ask you this: wouldn't you rather maybe spend your time doing other stuff, maybe going after really bad guys?
Well, the truth is that we are. In fact, 2/3 of the marijuana possession arrests by the Metropolitan Police Department were simple citations. So we're not out there spinning our wheels. There's only one person currently incarcerated in Nevada State Prison for possession of marijuana. He's also there for armed robbery. Out of the 17,000 people on parole and probation in the state of Nevada, only 200 of them are offenders for any marijuana-related offense. So Mr. Levine portrays this image. There were 155,000 arrests last year. That's 3% of those were for marijuana. We are not wasting our time on marijuana. The state legislature took care of the problem that Mr. Levine's trying to claim by putting people in prison. They did that when we made marijuana a $600 fine, as he pointed out, which is a fine that's less than driving without a valid license. So our state has taken care of this problem. This is nothing more than a different approach to the same thing that Nevada voters solidly rejected in 2002, and that's to legalize marijuana. No family is better off with more drugs. Mr. Levine points out that, as a parent, it is a parent's role, and it's a clergyman's role to try to help prevent people from using drugs in students. But our laws back those people up by saying that marijuana is a dangerous drug, and it's a drug that you shouldn't encourage.
There's a lot of interesting facts that are getting parsed. It is a $600 fine for the first offense. We're looking at a mandatory minimum when you have repeat offenders. And it's interesting, you say 2/3 just got a citation. Well, the sheriff said nobody was sitting in his jail, so what about those other thirds? It's 3% of 155,000 arrests.
Well,
so 5,000 people were arrested in the state for marijuana, 13 and a half a day for possession of marijuana in the state of Nevada.
How many times have you put on a police uniform and patrolled the streets of Nevada? I don't think you ever have. I have for 14 years. I can tell you that in my law enforcement experience, there has only been one occasion where I arrested somebody for just a possession of marijuana charges because he was smoking a joint right next to me. The reality is that a lot of people that go to jail for marijuana do so because they're ignorant
5,000
and they
people
commit
were not
other
arrested.
crimes.
5,000 people were not arrested for marijuana possession last year.
Because most of them are committing domestic violence, disturbing the peace, traffic violations, warrants, and they had marijuana on their... It's not a generalization. I'm telling you the truth because I've been there. You're generalizing a statistic, a number.
Give us the people. We've been trying to get the names of these people who were arrested for marijuana last year.
First of all, as a police department, it's not our role or responsibility to release that to you. Secondly, Mr. Levine wants to turn this into a fact-finding and arguing issue. He would like to attack me on every figure and then present his own figures as part of this argument. The fact is this is about Nevadans. We can argue all day long about who's right on what figure and who can make the most compelling argument towards who's being violated the most. The fact is that this is really about Nevada voters. This is about Nevada's future. I moved here for a reason. I moved here 15 years ago to serve the public as a police officer. Mr. Levine moved here a couple years ago to do nothing more than to propagate his opportunity to legalize marijuana and move on to the next community. He brought up that he's a parent. I'm a parent too. When I go home and my son sees this on television, I can look him in the eyes and say, son, I'm doing this because I want a good future for you.
And I can do the same exact thing for my son. And the reality is that if you want to take, Officer Raybach hasn't done this now, but in the past, he has argued that ending alcohol prohibition is a failure.
No, you misconstrued my statement.
No, I did not misconstrue your statement. You said we made a mistake. But wait, let me finish.
Okay.
You just had a nice chunk of time there. The reality is that we have a substance that is safer than alcohol. The reality is that our laws do not work. And if you want to take every single one of Officer Raybach's statements, take out the word marijuana and put in the word alcohol, he has a much better case. But nobody wants to make alcohol illegal. The reality is the laws do not work, that anybody who wants to smoke marijuana can. And but this is what's happening. Because it's the vast majority of the illicit drug market. You were very careful before where you said that the majority of people in social services are there because of drug use. But marijuana is only related to harder drugs because they're all illegal.
No,
the reality is
that's
that
not true.
the reality is that 61% of the drug trade is marijuana. These cartels and these gangs are essentially corporations. You take 61% of the profits away from any corporation, and you show me that if they're whether in good shape or not.
The
reality is the laws don't work with financing bad
Let's be real, Neil. The reality is that you say that we could remove. It is. Thank you. I'm not going to say let's get on the bus, Gus, because that'd be kind of ridiculous. But the fact is that you say that we could take out marijuana and put alcohol in there. The fact is we could do the same thing with his arguments by saying cocaine and methamphetamine. In fact, that's what a lot of the people that are in his corner would like to do. Let's just legalize all drugs.
We are not proposing legalize all drugs.
I'm not accusing you of that, but a lot of people in your camp are. Because they make the same arguments. Well, you know, cocaine, nobody abides by those laws. So we should get rid of those
lots
laws
of people
too.
do. 95 to 100 million Americans have used marijuana.
5
million have used cocaine. 2.7 use heroin.
But
so no. Wait.
A large majority of those people, Neil, you know, tried it maybe once or twice in their lifetime and moved on. You like to point out that.
Criminalize
hang
them?
on a second. You like to point out that my sheriff smoked marijuana. He did. And you know what the fact is? You're right. There are a lot of Americans that did it, and they don't do it today because they realize they made a mistake and it was an error in judgment. And the fact is that they aren't proud of that.
And what happens if they would have got arrested?
Flag up there, the fact is if they would have got arrested, they would have had to pay the consequences for their decisions, just like what everybody else should do in this state, and not just throw out the consequences because people like you think that...
Yeah, no, see, people like me. Now, the reality is that you say, you know, you could say this is like speeding. You could say this is like theft. But speeding and theft harms another person or their property.
On that note, we are out of time. It has been an excellent discussion. I want to thank you both for joining us. We're totally out of time. I'd like to thank the panelists for participating, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Bye-bye.